Thank you. Please stand by.
We are now rocking and rolling, so hope that gave everybody extra time to share who they are on that chat menu. But we are rocking and rolling now. And as we get going today, talking about limited equipment workout, again, my name is Michael Harper. I'm here with ETR in the Fitness Wellness Unit here at Texas DPS. And look forward to sharing with you some of the different things that obviously come from research, because that's one of the most important things of how we want to make sure that we're sharing information. But also beyond that as well, sharing with you information that's on a practical side as well. I have experience here in working with law enforcement, first responders for a number of years here within not only at DPS, but also within the Cooper Institute, where I traveled around the entire United States and even internationally as well to share things that comes from not only the research, but also my experience as a collegiate strength coach as well, and then my experience of just the knowledge base coming from information and working with individuals in a one-on-one setting that may not necessarily be an elite athlete, but I would say that everyone's an athlete to some nature or some degree. But beyond that, also sharing information from my knowledge within my master's degree and bachelor's and all those things. But without ado, since we're just a little bit behind schedule, jumping right into our content here, we're going to talk about the few items that you see here and jumping right into them overall. I think all of you are aware of that there's a plethora of different benefits to exercise, otherwise you wouldn't be here today. We hear it almost every day in the news. And as we highlight some of the different benefits overall, you see some of those listed here. A lot of it's with what happens inside our body that oftentimes we don't ever realize right off the bat. I always think about some of the different silent killers that we have within our body.
Welcome to the conference.
Unless we actually measure those items. And so when we think about high blood pressure, when we think about blood triglycerides, when we think about cholesterol, blood pressure, all of those things, sometimes we think about it as being silent killers because we don't necessarily always feel that. And so if there's any way that we can work to combat those items, then we're definitely moving in the right direction. And cardiovascular training is one of those big items that changes a lot of the values of things that happen inside our body.
That entry is not valid. Please enter your access code followed by the pound sign.
For us as well. One of the other things is reducing our, stress and those type of things. But also as we get into just overall of strength training, there's a number of benefits there on the side of strength training. We see things in reference to bone mass, bone density, improvements again on things inside our body. But one of the most important things I think for all of us here today.
That entry is not valid. Please enter your access code followed by the pound sign.
Or if you're utilizing it in reference just to, day-to-day living, we look at the stronger, more functional body. Individuals can do more work with less energy overall, and that's one of the biggest items for us overall that I think is benefit. But beyond that, we also take a look at the aspect of what about those individuals that may be looking at weight loss as well.
That entry is not valid. Your call could not be completed. Please try your call again later.
Benefit from the side of resistance training for weight loss, not only cardiovascular. When we think about the aspect of muscle mass versus fat mass, we know that 5 pounds of muscle is the same as 5 pounds of fat tissue. But when you imagine those two different items, one is much more dense. It's a leaner tissue, and that's where we think about that muscle. And so it doesn't take up as much space. But one of the other big items for us overall is not only creating a leaner body, is the caloric burn that we see that individuals have in helping them to not only lose weight, but to maintain that weight loss. One of the big items you see here is that we see that muscle is burning 3 times as many calories in a 24-hour period as fat. And so when we see individuals start to go down that journey of weight loss, adding in strength training, whether it's with weights or whether it's within body weight aspects of things, we can still challenge our body, is an important thing for us to be able to not only lose weight, but to maintain weight loss. Because as you start to lose that tissue and our body size gets smaller, overall we're able to continue to have a high caloric value, and so it makes it easier not only to lose weight, but also makes it easier for us overall in the aspects of continuing to keep weight off as well. So a lot of benefits from all those different aspects of things for us. But at the same time, there's a lot of barriers that can get in the way also, and so we have to address those as well. So as we think about those barriers, I want to give you just a moment of just thinking about what would you do in this situation here. You've got the best plan, but then you run into a roadblock here. Think about it for a minute. If you have a second, you might type in. I'll give you just a couple seconds for that. biggest thing is we have to think about what is your alternate plan. I love the idea, Susan, you mentioned there of finding an alternate route. Some of the other comments that we see here as well, there's tons of different situations that get in our way, and we'll talk about those of aspects of roadblocks, of motivation, of time, of all of those in just a moment. But I love the idea of here, if you get to this point, you got the best of plan and you're running this roadblock, well, we have to find another way to continue to work out. Sometimes it can be difficult, but if we set ourselves up with knowledge, increased knowledge like we're going to talk about today, hopefully you'll find maybe another route to continue your jog down that trail, or maybe something else you can do with equipment that you have. One thing that we carry with us every single day is just the aspect of carrying our body weight with us. And so hopefully that's one item you'll explore with us today. When we take a look, of other barriers of things that get in the way, knowledge, injury, sometimes we look at these items of, you look at this trail that was closed, and in that situation, you go, well, I had this great plan, and in that situation, I thought I was going to go down here, and there's a trail closed, and someone says, well, they can't work out then as a result. Some of you might say, well, that just sounds like a bad excuse. But the reality is any one of these issues that come up, whether it's time, whether it's knowledge, whatever that item might be, it's a real barrier to that person because maybe they haven't become knowledgeable about other options, another trail that's nearby, another place to go. I talk with individuals on a regular basis, and I had an individual that they were given time to work out as a part of their job. Yet they mentioned that one of their reasons they weren't working out was they didn't have time. I said, well, you're given time to work out as a part of your job duties. But part of the problem was for that individual that they had to be in uniform, and they had to drive to their job, and then they had to work all day, and they had to be in uniform to drive home. And so they mentioned, I just don't have time because of the fact that it didn't have that extra time to change in and out, shower, clean up, all of those items. And so sometimes we don't realize the barriers that are there, but we just have to find other ways to work around that overall. When we think about the aspects of injury, yes, we want to make sure that we're listening to medical guidance for individuals, but know that typically there's other areas of the body that you can work on, and especially in reference to our nutrition. We don't want that to throw us completely off base. Other items that might get in the way, we think of common barriers, because I just have energy. I'm working all day. I'm dealing with life all day. You might have kids. You might have a spouse. You might have just things going on, and you don't have energy. One of the items in that reference is we find oftentimes individuals will increase their energy as they continue to get on a routine within their exercise plan, but also it may be in reference to when did you last eat? Are you increasing energy for the meeting? For the workout that you have coming up? And so in that regards, I might recommend utilizing our snack matrix. You'll notice on our website, dps.texas.gov/ETR, and I'll share that again at the end on our ending slide for you. We do have on there a snack matrix. You'll see it in that last paragraph you see there. And on the snack matrix, it provides you with some healthy items that you might have that combines the protein and a little bit of carbohydrate. And that's what's going to get you going within your workout oftentimes is that little bit of carbohydrate to give you a little bit of quick energy. Although we also have to think about if I'm not going to utilize it, do I need to take it into my body at the same time? But we don't want to go down a rabbit path today of nutrition. And so moving on to other things, you might say, well, I'm just not motivated. Well, I always like to bring up that item of what does motivate you. I know a number of you here might be able to definitely give a hand raise if we were here together of the fact that you're motivated by money. Well, in looking at that, does exercise save you money? Or does exercise increase the money that you have for doing the things that you like? Well, I like to share a study that took a look at the correlation of cardiorespiratory fitness in midlife. So we looked at individuals at around age 49 on average age and took a look at what their fitness level was. In this study from the Cooper Institute, Cooper Longitudinal Study, they actually took individuals on a maximal exercise treadmill test. And so during that time, individuals wore masks, knew the value of the oxygen in the air around us, and then we could collect the expired air to find out exactly what they utilized, to find out their aerobic capacity, which tells us the amount of work that they can do with the amount of energy it takes. And through that process, we can find out what their fitness level is. And so in this study, we tracked to see where are these individuals at. Then we collected individuals' Medicare data from later in life for those individuals to take a look at what were their medical costs later in life. And so independent of any other risk factors for these individuals, we took a look at what happened to the money side of things for these individuals. Well, if I'm sharing this with you today, you probably know just a little bit of this, of the cost for medical care for these individuals at age 65 beyond. we saw that it was lower than the annual healthcare cost for most individuals by 40%. But you might be asking yourself right now, what does that mean in reference to dollars and cents? I may give you just a second to kind of think about that and guess what that is for you if you're a male or a female, of what those yearly savings are. And hopefully this will help motivate you every day when you're thinking about, should I work out? What would you do with this extra money as a result of just that quick workout that you put in each day? Well, the key is for males, the average savings was just over $5,000, and for females, it was about $4,000 yearly savings for those individuals compared to individuals that are at low fitness levels, so are high fitness. And what this is looking at is not their fitness later in life, but it took a look at what is their fitness at midlife and then what happened later on in life. So hopefully that's another point that helps you to think about a reason to get up and get out and motivate yourself to work out. But even with that motivation behind you, one of the items I saw pop up in that chat room as well is just the aspect of time. There's always that barrier of time that gets in the way. Do I have time to work out? How can I navigate around that? Well, I think it's interesting to take a look at some of the research that's been provided in reference to the aspect of time, because sometimes we think, well, I don't have 30 minutes or I don't have an hour to dedicate right now to my workout. But in looking at some research, there is a couple different studies that have looked at this in a walking study. They've also looked at this in running studies of what would happen if I compared the group that does 30 minutes all at once to a group that does 3 10-minute bouts. They do a quick 10-minute bout in the morning before they go to work, maybe a 10-minute bout of exercise at lunch, and then in the evening they do another 10-minute bout. So they still got 30 minutes, but it was split up into smaller segments along the way, versus the other group did it all at once. The question comes up, what happened in reference to the results after a few weeks at this in reference to VO2, in reference to blood pressure, in reference to those type of things? And what you saw was similar results in reference to VO2 or aerobic capacity for individuals, that functionality for them. Also similar results in reference to blood pressure, percent body fat, glucose, all of those. The key was the individual has to do enough work all at once to elevate the heart rate and sustain it, versus for an individual just doing a very small bout by itself of 1 minute. We want to make sure that's an extended bout. Of course, the control group, the group that didn't do anything during this duration of the study, didn't see result changes overall for them. And so the key is, yes, we can split it up. And so if we're looking for ways to perhaps overcome the barrier of time, one option might be the aspect of doing a small, quick bout of exercise in the morning before you get going, or in the evening when you get home, or during the day. Options are endless in that regard. But if we think about other options for us of the barrier of time, it might be, how can I get everything in? Because it can seem pretty daunting in reference to the aspect of, how do I fit in my resistance training, my flexibility, my cardiovascular training, and all those things? Well, a great option for you might be something that's called circuit training. Circuit training is a method of exercise in which individuals are alternating between their resistance training and their cardiovascular. Resistance training and cardiovascular. Lots of different ways to do it, but it offers you to get small bouts of the different items together in one workout. And so it's much more time efficient. We've also seen higher adherence rates, and then we've also seen greater VO2 increase than just doing weights alone. There's been a number of studies. One I was involved with previously was with the Air Force, of individuals that were non-compliant in reference to their fitness test. Most of those individuals performed just their running by itself and their weights by themselves, compared to a study that looked at individuals over 12 weeks of combining the two different together. During that, we found that over the 12 weeks, the adherence rate of people completing their workouts was higher than those that did their resistance and their cardio together. What they might do is 60 seconds of resistance, and then they might do 60 seconds of cardio. Then go back to either the same resistance training exercise or perhaps a different one, and do another 60 seconds resistance and a 60 seconds of cardio. Now, of course, we can change those different time metrics in there as well. Oftentimes, I'll utilize 30 to 60 seconds for the weights, and then 60 to 90 seconds for the cardio, because of the aspects of what our recommendations are, which we'll talk about at the very end. Throughout this, we found that the adherence was not only higher in that study I mentioned from the Air Force, but we also saw that there was a greater VO2 increase for them, and overall scores on all of our tests improved as well. When putting together a circuit, oftentimes if you follow what you see here of doing an upper body exercise, followed by a cardio exercise, and then a lower body, and then a cardio, maybe a core, and then a cardio, it gives you a way to balance the body out and then going through that perhaps multiple sets. I might do it a second time or a third time as I become more familiar with it and increase my fitness. So an option might be like you see in the bottom right here on here, you have the individual that she's doing perhaps some push-ups, and we'll talk about those in a few minutes. So once you finish the push-up, might get up and maybe do some jumping jacks, or perhaps if you're not ready for jumping, you might do a side step as well. So some sort of cardio there. Maybe he does that for 60 seconds. And then move over to perhaps doing some squats like you see the gentleman in the blue there, doing some squats, or maybe lunges like you see the person beside the individual in the blue. And so maybe doing 30 to 60 seconds of squats under a controlled motion while doing that. And then from there, maybe doing some cardio. And so maybe you follow that person out in the pink in the very back down the trail, and you go 30 seconds out on the trail, turn around, and 30 seconds back. Just a nice light jog. And then perhaps doing some sort of core exercise. Maybe it's some crunches, maybe it's some rotation with a medicine ball, whatever it might be, and then adding in some form of cardio again. Maybe at this point in time, you're doing some mountain climbers. Any form of exercise there, taking yourself to think about maybe if there's some bleachers at a stadium nearby and you run up those bleachers. These are all ways that we can overcome the barrier of time and perhaps get more in a shorter period of time. But overall, as we think about the barriers that get in the way, that life gets hectic, time is one of those factors, but just the hecticness of life. And so if we can work on finding a routine, it can assist individuals in adherence. I know for me, even for myself, I typically put my gym clothes right there on the side of my bed before I go to bed at night. I like to do a little workout in the morning, and so I put them right there by my alarm clock on the side of the bed, because then there's no thought about it. As I turn that alarm clock off, I can grab those clothes and put them on all at the same time there, so I'm ready to go. The other thing is thinking about where your stuff is ready to go out the door. Maybe you already are on the aspect of preparing some meals or your lunch for the next day. Just make it a part of that routine of packing your bag and putting it into the car, having it all ready to go. And one of the things, even if you don't have it, there's always ways around it, but it might be the aspect of putting an extra workout clothes in your car or an extra pair of shoes. Although there's been many times, unfortunately for me too, in which I've forgotten to take my shoes with me for exercise at work, and so I've ended up doing a workout routine in my dress shoes as I finish up maybe a presentation or a meeting that day. And so you have to find what are you comfortable with of still finding ways to get in some form of exercise. But before we get into some of the different options for exercise in just a few moments here of looking at what can I do without equipment, maybe at a park, what can I do with my body weight, all of those different aspects of things, we can take a look at just a couple items for us in reference to some exercise principles for us, because those are important to ensure that we're getting benefit. When we think about exercise principles, two that we want to talk about real briefly are going to be in reference to the overload principle and the principle of progression. When we think about these two principles, they're really important. When we think about the overload principle, it's referring to the idea that I need to do more than I did before. It's important that I do more than I did before, otherwise I'm in a situation where I'm not continuing to advance my body. So think about what, in this reference here, the person is doing a push-up. We want to make sure that we're doing some form of the chest exercises, but it might not be this point that we start at. And so we want to think about where would I start? As you think about just a moment, you might start at perhaps a push-up. But not everyone's ready for a push-up yet. So think for just a moment on your own for about the next 30 seconds of what might you progress from? Where would you start and where might you end up at? So if you think about what you might do in advance of this, you might think about that maybe I do a modified push-up. Maybe you do it on your knees, some of those options there. It may be that I start out with the aspect of maybe I'm doing a banded exercise, and we're going to get into those in just a moment. But the key is if I continue to do the exact same thing of where I started, it's important that I continue to advance it over time. I don't want to do the exact same thing I started with the entire time. I want to find ways to advance it. By doing that, I'm going to challenge my body overall, because otherwise I'm not going to see results. Yet at the same time, in day number one, I don't want to start on that one-arm push-up. And so we want to slowly progress over time. So just some simple principles that we want to consider and think about overall as we put together an exercise program. But the big aspect of what we really want to focus on our last half of our webinar with us together today is in reference to just overall what are some of my options that perhaps I can do without equipment. You know, overall I look at this and think that really our imagination is truly the biggest item that might be our barrier and our knowledge here, because there's endless options in this perspective without equipment, of thinking about, like you see in the picture here, of doing exercise without equipment at all, maybe with your body, of doing a plank, doing something that you probably do every single day of sitting down and standing up. But then also thinking about aspects of some non-traditional equipment that we're going to get into, and then finally some resistance bands that we'll explore. So if we think about options with just our body weight first, thinking about the progressions that we mentioned a moment ago, we have to take those in consideration. When we work on body weight options, we want to think about where am I at to start? What is most appropriate for my fitness level and my comfort level? Those are two important factors. Because we want to advance and we think about the aspects of that overload principle, despite that doesn't mean that I want to break form or jeopardize safety in anything I do. And so it's important that those are always at the forefront of any program. Yet, at the same time, we know that principle of progression, and that at some point in time, I have to continue to challenge my body. Oftentimes, unfortunately, I see individuals that are trying to build strength, or maybe a combination of strength and endurance, yet only continue to increase the repetitions. If I'm thinking about perhaps some body weight exercises like you see here, maybe just doing a simple body weight squat. Here we start out by actually sitting all the way down and then standing back up from it, sticking the hips behind us. The key is, well, this may be an exercise I feel comfortable with. At some point, I need to continue to challenge my body. Maybe I'm doing an upper range of about 15 repetitions of these in a row. The key is I don't want to continue to do these where I'm doing 30, 40, 50, 100 of these, because then I'm only building endurance, whereas my goal I mentioned a moment ago was more geared towards strength with possibly a little bit of endurance. So I want to continue to find ways to challenge it. Some of the ways that we might challenge that would be in reference to the exercise selection, which we're going to take a look at in a moment. But others, one might be that I add additional sets. So maybe I do one set like this of my 10 to 15 repetitions, and then perhaps I go and do something else like we talked about in our circuit training. But maybe I go and run a quick lap, and then I come back. Then I do another set for my second time through it. Over time, I can increase the number of sets, and that's going to be another way to challenge the body. Or I might take a look at progression of exercises. One progression might be that I move from that body weight squat into a step up, finding a firm surface. For here, I just utilized a park. We went over to the local school, and we found a picnic table. I could do almost a complete workout utilizing that picnic table. I want to make sure that I've got a firm foundation, and I want to make sure the appropriate height of the step is there as well. So I've got about a 90-degree bend at the knee when I'm stepping up, and making sure that overall form and function is at the paramount of what I'm doing. I also want to progress to the other leg. Here, I put more emphasis on one leg versus the both legs together to give me a nice progression from that squat, but it's not the only way that I could progress. I might move into a reverse lunge. This gives me a little bit more balance here than a forward lunge, yet it challenges me because I'm having to actually lift that leg off a little bit more than I do on that step up, and it increases the range of motion. So another way for me to continue to challenge the body overall, just like we talked about a moment ago, I have to continue to find ways, and it might be in sets. It might be in exercises, because you have to ask yourself, what are you most familiar with? As we continue, I might combine the two. And so now I'm going to do that step up, and then I'm going to move right into that reverse lunge. And so at this point in time, I'm challenging both legs now, one with the step up for the left leg, and then the right leg is doing most of the work on that reverse lunge there. Throughout this process, I've increased the amount of work, even though perhaps I'm doing the same number of repetitions or over the same amount of time as well. But I can think of other ways here. I might move into, at this point in time, something like a Bulgarian squat. I'm a Bulgarian squat. I've increased the range of motion slightly. I've increased the requirements for balance at this point in time as well. And so there's a number of different challenges I can take a look at with just squats. I'm still in the same body part. I promise we'll move on to others in a moment, but just looking overall, I might go to a pistol squat or a single leg squat here. On this one, there's a lot of modifications here that you can do. Perhaps that I'm on one leg on the way down and then two legs on the way up, and then I look at different options from there, continuing through the progression here. Or finally, I might add in some plyometrics. Plyometrics is a way to think about jumping. I could do these on the ground, or I could start to move on to a step here as well. Key here is I want to make sure that I've got enough strength to allow me to do this exercise safely. I've got a strong surface to utilize, and when I come down, I'm thinking about how do I optimize safety. Anytime I'm doing plyometrics, I always tell people to think about that maybe you're doing them in a library. So you're thinking about jumping and landing softly, not worried about being loud in the library if I'm working out, but the thing is it's going to emphasize the aspects of a soft landing to protect my joints overall. Or I might progress from here into a two-leg plyometric jump. Of course, making sure the same recommendations are followed. Now, I could continue on for additional means within the lower body, but thinking about some means for the upper body, I can think about push-ups as an option as we started to talk about earlier. Now, this push-up here is slightly advanced. I'm not yet on the ground, and so by being at an angle here, I have decreased the amount of weight that I'm pushing from the ground, although I advanced it because of the fact that I'm requiring more stability through that arm movement, which activates the core. I want to make sure my arms aren't moving. But perhaps I want to actually modify it again. Maybe I'm not starting here yet. If I were to move my hands up to the top of the table, right now I'm on the bench in which I'm seated on the table. If I were to move my hands up to the top of the table, at that point in time, I've decreased the angle slightly further, and as a result, I'm not pushing as much weight in my body. Or I might do it perhaps like on that railing behind me or against a wall, so I'm almost standing straight up vertical. Those are options I could even do inside in an office as well as a starting point for me, yet finding ways to challenge it at any one of those points. Even if I'm doing it against the wall with just my feet a couple of feet away from the wall, at that point in time, I still have the option of lifting the arm like you see here, activating the obliques and the core at the same time. So a ton of different ways that we can think about, and then I could look at the other direction of increasing it to much more difficult, of increasing the load, of putting my feet on an elevated surface. This is an option for us that's well more advanced. But thinking of balancing our body out, even in just these short videos here, I then next might look at the hamstrings and the gluteus maximus, areas that oftentimes are forgotten about or underworked that we might find. So if I can work the hamstrings and the gluteus maximus, areas that oftentimes are neglected, oftentimes are weak, and they're oftentimes stretched out muscles because of the fact that we're often in a seated position. Whether it's in a car out on the Texas highways or throughout the nation, or in an office on a regular basis, or even at home, we find that the hips get very tight. As a result, the hamstrings and the gluteus maximus on the backside end up getting stretched out, and they're oftentimes weakened. So this is a great exercise to work those. This exercise, you might actually start with the feet on the ground. If they're on the ground, I place my feet where the knees are still about 90 degrees with my feet on the end of the mat. To progress it, I progress to where my feet are now, where you see them on the edge of the bench. The goal throughout this exercise at any point in time is to have a straight line from the knee through the hips to the shoulders when at the top position, with the hands turned in or upward so we don't end up actually utilizing the forearms to assist. Yeah, as we're looking for ways to advance it, again, I might look at one more step of going to a single leg. And this could be on the step, or it could be an intermediary. Before I lift my feet to the step, I could put it where I've got one foot on the ground and the other foot in the air. These are all different ways that I could challenge the body by fitting them all together. And then one of our last areas here is looking at, for us in this realm of activity, of doing a reverse back extension. My reverse back extension, I'm just holding on the table, and I'm lifting up the back feet there behind it, so I'm getting that posterior chain of the low back of the erector spinae, as well as the gluteus maximus, and a little bit of hamstring at the same time. Or we could flip it the other way, of a little bit less intense of a modified on the ground, and this could easily be done in the office and many other areas as well. Another important area for us to work is that low back, which oftentimes will assist us with overall with posture. Any of that posterior chain we find is oftentimes neglected overall. So as we think about ways to put together a workout, even those few videos I showed you, well, there's a lot of different options there, puts together a complete workout. And so what you see here is a copy of that complete workout. More than happy to send this to you. If you'll just email us at physicalfitness@dps.texas.gov, we'll shoot you this back to you along with one other handout as well. And I'll put that email address up at the very end. But what you notice on this is you'll see that it provides you with information about a cardio option. And so I might do some simulated boxing movements, whatever that looks like to you. Whether you're a pro boxer or whether you're just getting started, moving the arms a little and the feet a little bit. Either one works. Doing that for about 90 seconds and then moving into some body weight squats. And so like we saw in that first video, or just basic body weight squats, or any of the amplifications. you'll notice here that it provides you with information of how can I modify it with that arrow down below each exercise, along with the arrow up of how could I enhance it as well, along with a few cues on the right-hand side. On it, doing 60 seconds, and then moving through each of the exercises you see here. So happy to share that with you, but lots of different options in reference to how to put together a workout, regardless of whether you have equipment or not. But moving into our second big area for us of exercises is how can I work out utilizing non-traditional exercise or workout tools. You might have seen individuals utilizing some of those things of tires. They might be flipping them, they might be pushing them, they might be pulling them, or utilizing ropes. I used to work with a lot of different first responders across the nation that had agencies that didn't have ropes, but that city had a fire department nearby, and so fire hoses that were being taken out of commission, they utilized for their fitness routines as a result. I even utilize those 5-gallon buckets like you find at Home Depot or at Lowe's or any other home improvement store, of even just putting simple things of rocks in the bottom, or maybe putting rocks and then water on top of it. Lots of different options here, but we're going to focus on that last one here together today of the swing set, because it's probably something that's maybe a little bit more readily available. And I bet you weren't thinking of utilizing the swing set necessarily as your workout or your gym set. But what you find is within the swing set, it replicates a lot of the tools you might see within a gym. One of those you might have heard about is suspension trainers. This is actually a TRX suspension trainer that I've just attached to a pole outside of the park and just doing a simple rowing exercise. And so on that exercise, doing a simple rowing exercise here, it challenges the body not only in reference to the targeted muscles of the latissimus dorsi and some of the posterior muscles, also the biceps, but also it's challenging the core muscle at the same time, because I'm having to stay in a plank position at that angle. Now, the further my feet are forward, the more difficult. The further my feet are backward, the less difficult. But what if we don't have that TRX? Guess what? It looks very similar when I jump over onto that swing set. That's right. I just moved over on the swing set. I'm right across the street from here at the DPS headquarters, utilizing their swing set, and on it, it looks very similar. I put my body in a straight line from the shoulders through the hips down to the ankles, and in this position here, I'm just pulling in through those arms into the rib cage there. What you find is not only that core is being challenged because I'm in that plank position, but also the instability of that swing set here, as you can see those chains vibrating side to side slightly as I go through this movement. Now, I could start this at any progression. If I were to take my feet backwards about 1 to 2 feet, I'm going to make it just slightly easier and modify it for me because I'm not as severe of an angle for me, and so I'm not pulling as much weight. Yet I could amplify it by moving my feet forward further in front of me towards that black mat you see. As I do that, I'm going to increase the amount of resistance I'm pulling and challenge the body by doing that simple movement. But other exercises I could do on that swing set might be as simple as taking my hands out in front here, and in my hands out in front, I could do this exercise and challenge myself through a push-up. Because my hands are on this unstable object, I'm going to challenge myself, similar to what I did on the push-ups, of lifting the hand up earlier. And again, the further my feet are forward, I'm going to make it just a little easier now. The further my feet are backwards, the more difficult it is. I'm also looking at maybe putting this out in front of my forehead. As I put it out in front of my forehead, I can take it into more of a triceps of, instead of putting my arms back and behind me, I can leave my upper arm out in front of me and just bend at the elbow instead of the elbow and the shoulder and doing a tricep exercise. Or maybe turning around and putting it out in front of me and then curling my arms into my forehead allows me to do my biceps. And then we could look at many different options. If I could turn that swing set upside down, here I'm on my hands with my feet on it, and I'm doing a knee tuck. And so in this position here, I'm working my rectus abdominis. We go, well, I'm not quite ready there. No problem. There's lots of different options I can do of seated on top of it as well, of twisting side to side, or perhaps turning back on my back, putting my feet on the swing set, similar to what you saw our feet on the edge of the step earlier for that glute bridge, working the hamstrings and the gluteus maximus. So thinking about non-traditional equipment, I want to remind you that you oftentimes have equipment all around you, especially within a playground. When you think of that swing set, you think of that bench step, you might think of the edge of the steps for the swing, for the playground you're stepping up. You might even think about the monkey bars as well. Those are all tools. I had a couple of years ago, I had some clients that I was training, and they mentioned it's just a beautiful day outside. Is there any way we could go outside, perhaps to, when we're outside, go ahead and work out at the park? And I said, fantastic, I'd love to. We got down there, they didn't realize all the different workout tools there were on that playground, from the pull-up bar, which was the monkey bars, from the swing set for exercises like you saw there. So they had lots of other tools that we utilize as a part of our workout. So know your options are endless, as long as no matter what you're doing, we're optimizing safety and form more than anything else. But last but not least, our third area that we want to focus on exercise options is in reference to utilizing resistance bands. You can find resistance bands oftentimes at your Walmart. You can find them at a number of different places online. You can find them at your Dick's Sporting Goods. You can find them at your Academy. I could go on and on of any type of fitness store. And with these resistance bands, oftentimes you'll find them with a handle. Sometimes they'll be braided. Sometimes they won't have handles. It's your preference overall. These are tools that are very inexpensive overall, but they're really easy to travel with. You can change the resistance by doubling up bands or increasing the thickness of the band that you purchase. But when utilizing the bands, I remember that I was working out with my brother one day, and I showed up to his house. And when I got there, my brother mentioned to me, he said, "Whoa," he said, "where are all the weights? Where are the workout tools?" I said, "They're right here in a small bag." And I pulled out these bands, and he kind of chuckled to himself, and I also chuckled to myself as a result, because I just wait for this workout. At the end of the workout, he definitely agreed with me that that provided enough resistance for us, because he didn't realize that the degree of resistance that these would provide. So know that these are oftentimes a great tool to utilize as a substitute perhaps for weights or in conjunction with them as well. I know for me, I travel quite a bit around the state of Texas, but also throughout the United States. And when I travel, I typically utilize these bands as a tool I take with me, because I never know exactly what I'm going to find at the location I'm at. And so they're an easy tool that I can toss in my bag. They don't take us much room, and I can utilize them for almost a complete full body workout. Now, when utilizing the bands, though, there's some important considerations. Number one, prior to utilization, I always want to check the band and make sure that band doesn't have any nicks in it or any tears. If it does, I want to take it out of commission and no longer utilize it. I also want to make sure I anchor it securely. Even if I'm putting it on my feet like you see here, I want to make sure that I've got it around the middle of my foot versus on the toes where it might slide off. Or if I have a partner holding it, I want to make sure they secure it with two hands so it doesn't accidentally slip out. If I'm utilizing a door, maybe a handle, I want to make sure that it's secure there as well. It's not going to slip off. And anything I anchored around, maybe I use that pole at the playground, I want to make sure that it's not going to tear the band while it's being utilized. But these bands provide me a plethora of different options. We can work the entire body, similar to you saw with some of these other videos already, such as doing lateral ways. It's working the middle of the shoulders here, the middle deltoids. Here you'll find stepping on the band. By putting on 2 feet, I have a little bit more resistance versus if I had stood on it with just 1 foot. And just going up the shoulder level here gives me a great option for me for working the shoulders. Or I could look at even the low back. The low back, I could sit here and do this of a low row in a seated position on the ground, or up on a bench here. As I pull this in, nice and snug, working a little bit of the biceps and primarily focus on that latissimus dorsi in the low back, being a great way for me to work through a full body workout. One of the things that we have for you is, as we introduce this for you and share this knowledge, we have actually a handout that has a complete full body workout utilizing resistance bands. As you notice here, of exercises similar to those videos, but with it, it has a written description of each exercise, such as this band chest press for you, of how you secure the band around your low back, underneath your elbows so it doesn't slide off up onto your neck, and then how you're pressing out in front of you while keeping that upright spine for you, and then slowly repeating back to where you started at to repeat the exercise. But it goes through a number of different exercises. It does include one body weight exercise of utilizing just an ab twist, or you could amplify that throwing in a water bottle, but you can utilize it just with your body weight as well. And then it goes into the lower body as well, into the back, all the way around the entire body for you. So that handout we have available for you, more than happy to share it with you. And I'll put this email back up at the end. I just have 3 more things I want to share with you first. But if you shoot an email, ask us for the webinar handouts, we'll send it right back to you. Well, the last 3 things I want to share with you goes back to first in reference to that aspect of adding in the cardiovascular with your resistance training. Remember, as you think about perhaps a circuit training method of alternating between your resistance training and your cardiovascular, there's lots of different tools that are around you that can change things up, getting away from maybe just jogging in place or jogging in general. Think about the simple tools of a jump rope, or maybe at the school that you have nearby of running some stadium steps or the nearby stairs that might be near in the park or around town. Think about those old agility drills that maybe you did when you're in athletics at some point in time. You might not have the ladder, but you could create one by putting chalk on the ground and making small squares, or just envision it. Go through the same type of drills, or simple things of, quick steps on a step up and down. There's lots of different options. Just remember to open up your imagination. As long as they're safe, you're at the right fitness level for them, and they don't jeopardize form. But the last two things I get asked about when I talk about exercise on a regular basis is how much do I need? When we look at the recommendations for health from the American College of Sports Medicine, the American Heart Association, the recommendations for health benefits for us in reference to cardiovascular is 150 minutes per week, or 75 vigorous minutes. Now, I can combine those. Let's say that I'm doing perhaps my circuit training, and I do my resistance training, and then I do 1 minute of really all-out, high-intensity vigorous, and then after I'm done my workout, I finish with maybe, a 10-minute jog, which is moderate. The way that I would calculate that of how much I had done is for every minute of vigorous training, I can count that as 2 minutes of moderate. But an important note here is these are recommendations for what? On the top left, you notice there, it says these are recommendations for health benefits. And the second half of the question is, what are the recommendations for weight loss? For weight loss, we typically want to come close to doubling these recommendations. Yes, even at 200 minutes per week, and beyond that, if I have not been doing anything at all, I will see benefit, and it's appropriate that I work up to these recommendations. But for significant change, these are the recommendations you see that are about double that. They can come from a combination of things, knowing that it doesn't have to be just slow, steady work. I can combine them, like we mentioned earlier, with circuit workout. Then in reference to our resistance training for health benefits, recommendations are at least 2 days per week, most all areas of the body, and repetitions of anywhere of 8 to 12 repetitions, 1 to 2 sets to start, and then over time increasing the number of sets. As we increase the number of days and the number of sets, we're creating overload. We're finding ways that I can challenge the body and continue to see results over the long term. So as we think about the challenges that come forth of no equipment, hopefully after today you'll agree with me when you hear that idea of no equipment, well, no problem at all. And I want to remind you that if you have any questions, feel free to submit those over in that chat box. We'll try to answer those in the next few minutes for you. But also for you, I want to remind you that also, if perhaps you're interested perhaps in any of those handouts I mentioned there earlier, please just be sure to ask us for those, and we're more than happy to send those to you. Let me get to that last slide for you real quick, and that last slide is going to have the email for you. If you just send a quick email to physicalfitness@dps.texas.gov, we're more than happy to send that back to you. We'll send you both those handouts for you, get those right out to you for those. So any questions you have, I appreciate your patience through a little bit of those technical difficulties at the beginning, but look forward to having you back for future webinars down the road. Note that we do have all of our webinars listed for us, typically about a month out, on our website for DPS, dps.texas.gov/ETR. So be sure to check there, and we'll have those for you. But I'll stay on for just a couple more minutes. For any questions you have, just submit those in the chat box, and we'll be more than happy to address those for you.